I was speaking to a local imam and I was just asking him, because in Ramadan I had some zakat to give, and I said, anywhere local? He goes, I have a full spreadsheet of people within just the borough Newham of where to give zakat. Because you tell me, do you want a male, do you want a female, do you want a female with a family, a single female, do you want a male, a single male with or a single parent, whatever you need, I have it here. And then it gets me thinking that we give so much charity to India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Palestine, Turkey, wherever we give the charity, but on our doorstep, we have so many people who need just the day-to-day funds. And you know and I know that living in London, you need $3,500 a month to just survive. And these people don't have it for whatever reason. You are one of the key members, and you've been pivotal in NZF. So what role has that played, and what have you seen in the difference in the behavior of people giving charity to now start giving locally as opposed to just constantly giving abroad?
So National Zakat Foundation was formed as a single-purpose charity. So, I've been there 12, 13 years, one of the initial trustees. I'm chair today and work closely with Sheikh Sahel to kind of, constitute the institution of zakat within the UK with a domestic focus first. Basically, this, the concept is that we support local need first before we send it abroad. So that's the concept where, there's very strong hadith that support that. At the same time, we have to recognize that people will be moved by relatives abroad, certainly the older generations, and for the younger generations, they will see the crisis around the world and will be moved to support that. So it's not hard and fast that people will just follow a philosophy or, in our case, an opinion 100%. So we recognize that. But I think one of NZF's achievements over the last 12 years has been that they've moved the dial around accepting that there is a need locally. Before that, it was always just a presupposition that it'll go abroad because there's poorer people abroad, and that there were people suffering below our very noses, as it were, and we weren't helping them, right? And so that kind of very much started in that way, and we were helping initially underprivileged is wrong word, sisters in real trouble actually, and we that's how it kind of started, and it's kind of grown in terms of its mission. It's not just providing services to zakat givers like calculators and then being an agent for distribution. It's just far more encompassing than that. Zakat is an institution as a third pillar of Islam, hand in hand with Salah. It's more than just poverty alleviation. It's about building our own welfare system. That Islam itself gives a safety net. And that, we're connected to each other. That we don't know, one day we may be in need of that safety net. And we know, we have confidence in each other that our own deen and our own community and our own ummah will be there, right? So it has huge ramifications for confidence and the mentality and the connectivity of the ummah, right? So if we think about it as a welfare system, our view at NZF is that it doesn't all have to go through NZF. It's not a charity where we measure, I've got to have 50 million come through us, and it's how much we raised and how much we gave. It's not about that. It's actually building a zakat system. And one of our most successful initiatives, and you mentioned Newham, we have an initiative called the Community Zakat Program. And we work with masajid in all the big cities and community centers. And just like you said, with the imam who has his spreadsheets, if we're talking about localization of zakah, who knows best who is needed in a dignified way, right? Because people don't want to, they're praying next to you, and they may have a need, and they may have confided in the masjid, but we're preserving their dignity. So you talked about Newham. We work with Barking Masjid, and they were one of the first masjids that came on board on the Community Zakat program, and mashallah, it's a very successful program, where we have given them our system of assessment. You know, are they below the nisab? You know, it's got a back end to our database, so it has the kind of data points to help the masjid making sure that they're appropriately allocating zakat. And then we provide either zakat funds to the masjid for them to distribute, or they can access our system and we distribute the cash to the recipient. And by the way, NZF is one of the largest British charities to do cash grants, Muslim or non-Muslim. Okay, so, you know, this and there's a lot of studies on this. What's the effect and the impact of a cash grant versus, you know, other forms of charity? Because they tend to be, you know, kind of driven by some other form like housing or whatever, right? So that CZP approach means that imam then, he there's two things, the two benefits of this. He's got NZF's funds to start helping these people. Secondly, because he's got a system in place, he can then raise with the congregation and start generating zakah from people like yourself in that example that you gave. So he doesn't have to go through NZF, but we've given him a system to deliver it. And mashallah, now I think we're in about 25 masjids. We're doing a deep dive into Birmingham for a year, and we're going to be expanding all over the country. We're like with the Leicester Zakat Foundation. We're working with them. Birmingham prominent mosques like Green Lane Mosque. We're working with Al Manar, for example, in London. We started with Manchester Central Masjid. I think Didsbury or Cheadle, one of the masjids there as well. So it's like Bradford Community Foundation. So mashallah, I think we've hit upon something. I really think that this is going to be a really big way to kind of embed zakah through the masjid. Remember, zakah and salah is mentioned together so many times. And actually, we never thought about it this way, that the institution of salah and the masjid should work hand in hand with the institution of zakah, which would have been the Bayt al-Mal in the past, but in our Muslim minority countries. It should also be the forum for zakah. And then what you can do is then layer on other services, because for me, the mission is, how does a zakat recipient become a zakat payer? How do we take that person on a journey through the life cycle? It's not just what we call a plaster, sticking plaster, just to help them for a month. How do we bring that person right through from homelessness to food and basics to shelter to empowerment, i.e. train that person to earn the money, teach a person to fish?
Would it be better, or do you think it's better to have a side-by-side, to have like a waqf or endowment system where you're not just relying on zakat donations, you're just generating the income from either properties or other investments to then give to these people who are in need?
Yeah, so just two things. There's a mismatch of demand and supply, right? The supply of zakat in this country is outweighed by the demand, right? So just give you an example. NZF helps about 2,000 people in the UK every month, but there's about 12,000 applications for zakah. So there's a need, first of all, to highlight that more zakat should come to local causes, right? I think we've got to make sure that happens. And there's plenty of zakat. Like you said, a lot of it goes abroad. If you look historically, zakah worked hand in hand with waqf. One didn't replace the other. And financial sustainability is really important. So even for NZF, we have costs that we bear. For example, the infrastructure of zakah. I have to get that through my gift aid, or I have to ask for sadaqah. But we need to really have a waqf to support like the overheads. And similarly, I was involved in a Mercy Mission project called Waqfinity, where the idea was to bring waqf home to the individual. If you talk to the average Muslim, what is waqf? I mean, we could do a survey at it, right? They're gonna, first they may not understand it, but B, even if they understand it, the masjid's got something like a waqf for, it's like some old buildings.
First time I heard waqf was when you see in the Quran and it just says waqf.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it. The Quran Waqf. Yeah. The printing of Quran. And so, if there's anything that we did achieve at Waqfinity, and we bought a couple of buildings and a Waqf was formed, and inshallah we'll bring it back. Was the concept of this? How do we take Waqf and make it personal to you? So Zaid, you could have a Waqf. You don't have to be Bill Gates to have a foundation. Why don't you have a Waqf? And we use digital, the digital landscape, whether that's blockchain or through just fractionalization, where you don't have to set up deeds, trusts, foundations, charities, that you can have a Waqf, that you can see the benefits of that Waqf with full transparency. So you put in £1,000. What does a Waqf do? It invests it in the background. It's very much like what I do in business. It invests it. And then there's a return, right? So say you bought property and there was a 10% yield. You don't see that 10% yield coming into your account, your Waqf account. And then you don't see necessarily that 10% was then allocated to elderly care or drug abuse problems or something you selected that you wanted your Waqf to do. So if you look historically, right, we obviously know about, Hazrat Uthman's Waqf, right? But, Waqf were very advanced in the Ottoman Empire. There was a Waqf that looked after cats. I think there is to this day in Istanbul. There was a Waqf where a waiter in a restaurant accidentally broke a plate, which he would have to come out of his salary. There was a Waqf that paid for that. Right? Obviously, hospitals and musafir khanas, travelers' inns, they were Waqfs. And so I think it's very much time to revive the Waqf. I think, some of the issues that we talked about earlier about longevity and time frame is a big obstacle. You're talking to a guy who's tried to sell Waqf in a positive sense. When I say encourage people to donate to Waqf. It is so hard.
Because it goes back to the first thing you said about immediate gratification.
Immediacy, right? They'll say, you're saying, Sultan, I put £1,000 in, and only £50 is going to go to the cause. But it's potentially £50, brother, forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, or perpetuity to the extent that Waqf survives. But the £1,000 could help somebody now. So then I have to kind of change the argument with that brother or sister and saying, let's look at your giving as like a wallet. How much is zakah? It's obligatory. It has to be distributed within 11 and a half calendar months or 12 Islamic months. There's your sadaqah. There's sadaqah jariyah that's going to benefit you after your death. And within sadaqah jariyah, there could be waqf. Are you not thinking about perpetuity? So after you go, it will help you, right? That's the benefit of waqf. What proportion of your giving, and Muslims are, I think, again, 3 or 4 times more likely to give, but what proportion of your giving should go to long term? So we've got to break this mental barrier. Even let's start small, even if it's 10%, put 10% long term. Again, people go immediacy, what's in them, this campaign, this conflict. We really got to think a bit strategically, right? Strategic giving, strategic thinking really needs to improve. If I'm doing a self-assessment scorecard on Muslims in our community, it's low.
Would you say that's the top priority for us to improve, to give us that financial dependence that we need, strategic thinking?
No, absolutely. Because let's put it this way. So, I don't know, COVID happened, right? Which community group was affected the most?
South Asians.
South Asian, but particularly Muslims. Muslims had more deaths. Now, just imagine there was a multi-billion-pound waqf. Let's call it the Muslim Civil Society Waqf in play. And it did a couple of things. It could react to calamities, unpredicted calamities. So the COVID, I think, was called the 1 in 100 year event or whatever. The statisticians will say that, right, or whatever. So could it have done something? Very quickly responded with this amount of wealth generated from investments and endowments to do something? Could it have helped reduce the impact on our community through education, through support, whatever it is, either handing out vitamin D, whatever it is, right? And then proactively, right? If you sit here today and you now map out the social problems that we will face as a UK ummah, like let's take elderly care. That's a ticking time bomb. It's not like the old days of this extended family support network. There'll be, I don't know, dad, widower, in Dewsbury, son works in London in the city. Person's going to have to go into a home, maybe, or domiciliary care. But let's say if it's a home, is it faith-based, right? These things are a ticking time bomb, right? And so again, a strategic waqf could say, look, I can see this time bomb. I'm going to now invest in social enterprise, i.e. entrepreneurs who are going to fix this. It serves a social need and they'll make something for it, right? They'll make some profit. Let's start faith-based care homes. Yeah. So we can do it through private sector, or it could work, with government and saying, government help us, because ultimately is going to save a taxpayer money, what we're doing. So there's this strategic thinking. I think when you're talking about waqf is essential for that, right?
Yeah.
We've got to build these institutions that can proactively handle the problems we face. I've often said this, but if you look at the drop-off, so if you go to take Ireland, right? Ireland, when I grew up, lots of Catholic church. We know that Catholics were very practicing in Ireland, but they've seen a massive drop-off within one generation in attendance at church. So we can sit here very complacent. Oh, mashallah, Jummah, we got 4 Jamaats. It's all full. You can't get any space. But just look what happened in one generation. Are we sitting here complacently thinking, oh, it's just going to continue endlessly if we don't work on the youth, turn the masjid into what it should be, a hub of a community, right? Are we sitting here complacently thinking that? Because what could happen in a generation could be calamitous if we don't take action. And that's a big burden on our generation. We have to be thinking strategically and long term, right? Because you can't be complacent just because you think the masjids are full today, that they'll be full tomorrow.
100%. Just one final question before we finish. If we look at the Jewish pound, they've built a really good tech. They've built Hollywood. They've built media. If the Muslim pound has that high level strategic thinking and galvanizes and mobilizes and everyone comes together, what can us as Muslims build?
Well, I think the sky's the limit, as they say, right? I mean, let's look at that in 3 components. So I think we talked a lot today about how we can build wealth. I think there's a big opportunity there. There isn't that many obstacles. I think if we can, especially if we support each other, let's build wealth. So that's, if you like, money. That's resource. That will just automatically, given the Muslim propensity to spend on social, right, on the S of ESG, on social, that will help. 2 then is a bigger challenge right now is media and the perception of Muslims, right? So this is where your strategic outlook comes in, right? We have to recognize that some of our donations, we talked about time frame from zakah, short time frame, sadaqah, sadaqah jariyah to waqf, but it's more than time frame now. Now we have to look at the segments of our spending, and it's, it doesn't seem as important to, fight Islamophobia, for example, as it is to support a crisis in Africa. But actually, just as much as zakat, local zakat is important, the position of the Muslims and winning of the hearts, which is a zakat category, in the classical tradition in the Quran, that is really important. Again, that strategic thinking will help us do that. And actually, whilst people feel a bit despondent about it, the guys control all the big social media platforms and whatever, but more than ever, because of the digitalization of media, there is an opportunity, right? There's an opportunity to break through barriers to entry that there wasn't there before. And then finally, in terms of politics, right? And engagement with the law and the governance of society we're in. We've seen increasingly more Muslims entering parliament, which is good, entering politics. But I think we've got to be working in all parties, right? I think what some people think is that Islam's making you, I don't know, socialist by definition, as opposed to, working with business-minded groups. We've got to understand that actually Muslims should be operating across the political spectrum.
Should be balanced.
And working from within to, look, not in this. I think the problem we are, we can't win if we do, and we can't win if we don't. So if you don't, you're isolationist. And if you do, it's entryism, right? So we've got to actually just be managing that, saying, look, actually, no, I believe with your economic philosophy. Let's just take a centre-right perspective. We believe in lower taxes, less debt, a balanced budget, for example. Yeah, but I don't believe in your approach to the Middle East. But we have a lot in common on these aspects. So we could be in those parties and saying, okay, whilst we disagree on your approach to the Middle East, here's our arguments why we should be, because, I don't know, foreign direct investment could come in from Saudi if we took a different position, which would benefit Brits here. So I'm just using that as an example. Yeah. So politics and supporting politicians with the right values again, and understanding that they make a lot of... I think people give politicians a hard rap. It's a very, very difficult job, particularly Muslim politicians, because they have to make certain compromises, perceptional compromises. But we have to accept that it's better that they're in a position to influence the debate. So when you take those three areas, we talked a lot about the making of wealth, but how we can strategically think about positioning of Muslims and the narrative and the communication, the media, and how we can also engage in politics properly, which I think we're trying to, but we need to do more. I think when you put those three together, I think when you talked about what can we learn from the Jewish pound, I think the Muslim pound could also get stronger through those three kind of dimensions.